Hello and welcome to the Coach by Matthews Let's Talk podcast. This is our second episode, and if you listen to episode number 1, you'll know that we wanted to introduce ourselves before we got stuck into the good stuff. The last episode was all about me, which means today it's all about Mike. So let's get started. Mike, welcome to your own podcast.
Hello.
I just wanted to start with a fairly easy question to settle you in to today. Tell us a bit about yourself. You are from Manchester. So what was it like to grow up there?
Yeah, originally Manchester, moved around quite a bit in my time. Obviously moved around with university and then spent a bit of time in London, a bit of time in Canada, and then ended up down in Devon with a pit stop in Cornwall on the way. Growing up in Manchester, not a extravagant childhood, just a normal childhood, really. Good friends growing up, real good school life. Grew up with my older brother, Anthony, family of 4 until my young brother, Joe, came along. Yeah, so nothing too special about my childhood. I was always into sport. I was always into fitness, whether that be the early days playing football or getting into athletics. And then I later found basketball.
Great. And what's your role within the fitness industry at the moment?
So my role in the fitness industry at the minute is face-to-face personal trainer. So that's on the gym floor, and also an online coach as well.
Brilliant. So if we sort of look back to your childhood, how do you think that shaped you into the person that you've become now?
So growing up as the younger of two brothers, I think there was a lot of, especially from my part, a lot of sibling rivalry going on. It bred a deep competitive nature. And then that fed into people I'd hang around with and friends, to the point where I had this one friend, actually a guy called Ryan Corbett. He always seemed to be one step ahead of me, or in my eyes, he always seemed to. He picked up a basketball and he started shooting one day, and I thought, he's quite good at that. I think I could do that. And it turns out I could do it quite well. And then that rivalry started, so it was always kind of me against him, who was better, who was the best in the year. And then the friends, the network I built around me, especially the male friends, we all started playing basketball together. And then that bred a bit more competitive nature. And then, you get into your late teens and your friendship group changes. And now there's a solid 4 or 5 of us who kind of all pit each other against each other, but we all respect our individual strengths as well, especially on the basketball court. And then moving from basketball, fitness was always a big part of my life. Like I say, I went to a basketball academy when I was younger, so that demanded being physically fit. Got into weights, lifting and weight training about the age of 14, and it's something that stuck with me all the way since. And I've just always been intrigued about what the body can do, how it handles different scenarios, what you can put it through, and how it can bounce back. So that's that curiosity has kind of always led me down. I'd probably say always led me into the path of where I am now, I'd say.
And do you feel like, because you were started off as the youngest sibling and then moved to the middle sibling eventually, do you feel like that you had a feeling where you had to try and be the best?
Maybe not the best, but I had to stand out. It's a running joke in my family that I've always had middle child syndrome, even when I was the second child. But if you ask any second child, if you're growing up in the shadow of the first child, I think that's always going to be something that, to some degree, you've got a chip on your shoulder about that. And I was thinking about this recently, actually. I think the competitive nature probably stemmed, the earliest point I can remember of my competitive nature kicking in is, and it sounds really stupid saying it now, but my my older brother drew a picture for my granddad once, and I saw the picture that he drew, and I thought I could do that so much better. So I drew it, and then my granddad said, well, yours isn't as good as his. And I always remember that. And yeah, I don't think that's something I've ever said before or told anybody before. But I always remember that, and I always remember, right, I got to be better. And whether that's just something that stuck around with me, and whether that's a bit of foolish pride, or, like you say, the middle child syndrome kicking in when I was the second child. But then it stemmed to really ridiculous things growing up, like if my older brother would have, if he would go back for more Christmas dinner, a second serving, I would always have to have 3 servings, and just things like that. Still silly, stupid things like that, looking back. But it definitely led me down a path of always striving and wanting to be maybe not the better out of every situation, but be the best I can be in every situation. And that's where that competitive nature comes from. And then as a young person, the people I looked up to in terms of sporting icons, young boys normally look up to kind of the David Beckhams, the Paul Scholes, going back a few years, any kind of like big football fan, because I played basketball. It was always kind of the Michael Jordans and the Kobe Bryants that I looked up to. So, and with that came a different nature to it, because obviously the sports demand completely different things and completely different mindsets. So yeah, the sports personalities I looked up to definitely molded my vision and my drive as well.
I think you've continued with that as well. Like even now, you still want to be the best that you can be. You're good at sort of looking at other people and being like, okay, well, this is what they're doing. How can I be better? What's missing? What do I need to do to up my game, as it were, or fill in the gaps that other people aren't?
Yeah. And a saying or a quote, I guess you could say, it was that Kobe Bryant always said was, don't look at what I do, look at how I do it. And it's not the case of copying or emulating. It's like, and you can bridge that to any discipline, whether you're a teacher or you do jiu-jitsu or basketball or football, or if you're a painter. You don't look at what somebody's doing, look at how they're doing it, how are they applying themselves, how are they, what work are they doing behind the scenes in the sporting world, how many hours extra are they training a week, what sort of weight training are they doing, what methods of stretching and rehabilitation, or what kind of nutrition and diet are they following. So yeah, I think it's something that's deeply rooted in me. For sure.
And if we look at Mike as a child, what did he want to be when he grew up?
A basketball player. I wanted to be a professional basketball player when I was younger. I like to think I was a good standard player. Maybe that's that competitive nature coming in. It's in that drive to always want to push myself. I don't know if my ideas were bigger than my station, but definitely at kind of the under 14s, under 16s, and then kind of the juniors. I'd say I was in my local area probably ahead of the curve. So yeah, the basketball world was something I definitely wanted to go into. I then moved to a basketball academy where I went from being a big fish in a small pond to a small fish in a big pond, and my eyes were opened up somewhat of the level that you needed to be. And in some ways, I don't think I ever reached those levels that I expected myself to reach, I think.
And you were at the point where you were at the academy and things like that, you were actually playing semi-professionally as well, weren't you?
Yeah, so we were, if you think of the professional world of basketball, you've got the Basketball League, which essentially, if you liken it to what people know, would be the Premier League in football. And then the division, the Division 1, Division 2 going down. So at the time, we were Division 3 in that world. But for, 19 to 21 year olds, you've got a lot to battle with. And at the time, I'm sure we'll get into it, but at the time, I'd moved away from home, and there was, a lot of challenges that come with that. Finding yourself, finding what you enjoy, partying a little bit. Not that well, I had my moments, but not that I was massive partier. But looking back, there is a sense of, if I'd applied myself slightly differently, where would I be today? I always think to myself, if I had the drive and the self-awareness that I have now, back then, how would things have turned out? But that's age, and that comes with time, I guess.
Yeah. And is that the drive that you had at the time, is that the reason why that didn't turn into a career for you, or was there another reason?
I would say, hand on heart, looking back, I don't think I was good enough. I wanted to be. There was, I potentially, I just don't think I was good enough at the time. Which is okay. I'm fine with that, because it was a fantastic part of my life. Growing up in Stockport in Greater Manchester, and then moving up to Durham, 250 miles away from your family when you were 16, when most people do that at 18. I moved in with, I think there was 17 people in the academy, 18 people in the academy. We all lived together. We all grew together. We all went through, the learning of, the silly things of how to even cook pasta together, to dealing with relationships and first girlfriends. And there's a lot of firsts that we all shared together. And I think, looking back now, if you were to put me in a room with any one of those, young lads, it's the kind of friendship that, you don't speak for years, and you'd pick up from day one, straight away. That's from where you left off.
Nice. And then when we met, you'd gone totally off in a different direction. And you were working in the hospitality industry and were striving to become a manager. How do you go from basketball all the way through to hospitality?
So basketball was a massive part of my life, probably from the age of, I would say, 11 up until, say, maybe 24, 25, around that time. And then I got stuck into uni, came out of uni, and I always say, if it wasn't for basketball, I would never have gone to university. I just wanted to carry on playing at a high standard. And then came back from university, as most people do, moved back into your parents, into the old world, and then into the old ways. And then I, at the time, needed a job to kind of pay my way as a young mid-20s. And then I kind of fell into, in between that, I'd qualified for my level 2 fitness instructor. And the plan was for it to pass on to my level 3, but I never pursued that. And I think that would have been about 2011, 2012 maybe. But then, at the time, my life was just taking a different direction, and I, like many, just thought, come out of university, fall into the mold. Okay, so now you get 9 till 5, you do that job, for a couple of years, maybe get a promotion, increase your salary from 18 to 20 grand, to 20 to 24 grand. And money was good in terms for the age bracket I was in. I was working in sales. I could always sell. That's something that came quite naturally to me. And then I got into working for Sky Sports. So here I was just basically selling sports packages. So Sky Sports, pay-per-view, things like that, to pubs and clubs around our patch. And then at the time, I'd met this girl, an ex-girlfriend of mine, and her family lived in Canada. So we lived together for a year, and then she decided that she wanted to move back to Canada to live with her family. They were English, but they lived over there for various different reasons. So we moved over there, and I worked in a gym over there, which was great. Really liked that, because that combined kind of the selling and my passion for fitness that combined those two roles. And then that ended in complete disaster, really. So I came back, and at this point I was probably late 20s to early 30s, and I mentally hit rock bottom, and I was then searching around for another job, and I'd seen Canada, I'd seen a bit of the world. I thought, it's a beautiful country, and part of my heart still lives in Canada because of how beautiful the place is, and the life I had there was fantastic. And then again, like I say, I'd hit rock bottom. I was living on mum's sofa, and then in between this, my older brother had moved down to Cornwall, and me and my mum and my younger brother went down for a long weekend in Cornwall. And every time we went to you go out for lunch or go for a drink. Every time we went for lunch or a drink, I was like, I could sit here for a while on this beach with a pint in my hand. And then we'd go to, we were there, let's say the Thursday to the Tuesday. And then we actually planned to go to Newquay on the Saturday, I think it was. And my family could see what I was thinking. They had had a chat with them. And then they said, well, why don't you just write up a CV? Just write up a CV and, we can hand it out in Newquay. So that every time we passed a bar, I handed out a different CV. And then it just so happened that I walked into a cider and pizza restaurant, which was fantastic. They do fantastic pizzas and great cider as well. But there's a lot of drunken nights I had on their cider, which was great. But yeah, so I walked into it, and it just so happened that I bumped into the assistant manager, and he saw on my CV that I'd lived and worked in Canada. And in 8 months' time, he was due to be moving out to Canada. So we got a conversation going, my sales started going, I got onto a pitch.
Started tap into your knowledge.
Started selling myself, started selling Canada. And so that was the Saturday. And then they contacted me, said, we want to see you on the Monday. Saw them on the Monday, and then I basically got the job there and then. And they said, we want you in 2 weeks. So I went back up to Manchester. I basically had nothing going for me there apart from, a solid friendship group who stood by me through thick and thin. I just remember on the boys group chat, I said, lads, got something to tell you. I'm moving to Cornwall. And they were all like, do it. We'll always be here. Do it. They knew what I'd been through. So yeah, moved, and within 10 days, I'd found myself a house share with a room. I'd already got the job, moved in, and yeah, that was my route into hospitality, which then became a journey.
Yeah, so I guess that leads me on to my next couple of questions. So I'll split it into two. So firstly, what was it like working in the hospitality industry? It must have been quite tough.
Yeah, it is. It's a very tough industry to work in. You're working long hours, often for minimum wage. Your 10-hour shifts, split shifts, often unsociable hours. But working in a place like Newquay, it's got its reputation for a bit of a party town, and everybody knows everybody, so everyone understands kind of where you are and how tough your lifestyle can be, and everyone generally has the same days off. So yeah, no, it was made a lot easier by living in such a beautiful place like Newquay. You've got 4 or 5 beaches around you. You can go surfing on your day off. In the summer, it's fantastic because the heat and it's a hive of activity. But yeah, the actual industry itself can be quite tough, and it can grind you down if you let it.
And I guess if you're single, it's probably it's probably not so bad because you probably don't really care as much about when you've got time off and things like that. Whereas if you're with someone or you've got a family or something, it's probably a bit more of a difficult industry to be in.
Yeah, definitely. I would say the same with like you when you were working in law and corporate. If you listen to episode 1, we covered that in episode 1, how when you're young and single, you've got all the time in the world. You can be sat there at 11 o'clock at night typing away and not worry about anything. Like likewise for myself in the hospitality industry, when I was young and single, I could I could work from 9 a.m. till 8 p.m., go out, roll in at 3 o'clock in the morning and just hang out for the rest of the day. Whereas, obviously that's not very conducive to, being in a serious relationship or a family life. And there was a lot of failed relationships that I saw in my friendship group at the time that didn't last because of the lifestyle that the hospitality industry demands.
Yeah, I can understand that. And how do you think your time in hospitality then contributed towards where you are now?
I think it put me on a path to realize what I didn't want to do, because I didn't realize it at the time, but I was, as you can imagine from how I've described it, I was functioning in a massive state of burnout because of the lifestyle I was living. It wasn't, if you ask me now, I'll tell you how important recovery is, how important sleep is, how important good nutrition is. But if you asked me back then, I would say how important getting some money is so you can go out and have a good night and then make sure you've got enough money for surf lessons on the weekend. So yeah, it definitely made me realize what I didn't want to. I mean, it was great when I was working in it, but once I realized which path my life wanted to go in, I was like, something needs to change. It has to be the industry I'm working in has to change because it's not conducive to, for a loose sense of the word, it's not conducive to a grown-up life.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I guess your priorities change as well.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I was working in the hospitality industry when we met. And, whether, we didn't know where we were going to go, like any relationship in the early days, but you find that and you think, well, I'm going to give my all to this and something needs to change here. And you're working 9 till 5. I'm basically doing the same, but on the other end of the clock. And something had to give. And, the thing that had to give would have been me in the hospitality industry and changing my ways. So, yeah.
But also, I think you didn't really want to, although it's kind of different now, but you didn't really want to be in a position where you're having to work weekends all the time and things like that. Whereas I suppose now, at least you're doing it because you want to do it. You don't have to work all weekend if you don't want to. Yeah,
totally. I mean, if you think back to when we first started dating, we would see each other probably every 2 weeks at a time.
Yeah.
And that would have to be me taking annual leave to come up or you come down. And and it's surprising how much you're willing. It's surprising what you're willing to do when it's something that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And that's both senses of the words, with your relationship and with kind of the industry you're working. Because like you say, now I work 6 days a week, of which, is a weekend. And, I love it. I'm up at 4:30 most days and I'm knackered by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but I absolutely love it.
Yeah. You're getting that caffeine
fix
from
yes.
your energy drinks. So how did you then make the move from hospitality back into fitness?
So the move happened, and again, I've probably never said this before, and you can have this one. You were probably influential for it. You put me on the path, I would say.
Well, you're welcome.
So I moved from Newquay up here, up to Devon. And then at the time, I knew I didn't want to work in hospitality. Just going back in the story a little bit, when Boris put us into lockdown, I got furloughed. And that, I think, was one of the most influential times for me, because I realized that I don't want to be in the hospitality industry. I came out of my furlough meeting and completely broke down because I realized how much stress was on me and how much of a burden it was putting on my mental health. So then I moved up here. We got together. I moved in with you. It was only supposed to be a month at the time, but then our dog Lola came along and I just kind of fell into different separate jobs. I was like, I'll try this job, one of which was a freezer picker, working in a freezer picking meat. And that was horrible.
To be fair, I mean, that wasn't really a long-term prospect.
No.
It was just something to tide you over.
Yeah, that was to tide me over. I then got a job in a logistics company working as, which, that was an all right job, good money. But I had an epiphany one day and I was sat at my desk tapping away on my keyboard and I thought, I can't do this for the next 40 years until I retire. I came home and spoke to you about it and you said, well, why you've got your level 2, why don't you push for your level 3? So that kind of got me thinking and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna push for it. And it just so happened that at the time I was playing basketball I was training with a local team here in Devon. And the lad who would take me training actually works for a gym company, one of the council gyms here. I told him the situation and he said, actually, we're looking for a gym instructor in our gym. And that kind of, right, okay, maybe this is what's supposed to happen and this is the direction I'm supposed to go in.
And now here you are.
And now here I am, yeah.
Excellent. So I think it's fair to say that it was all because of me and I will take credit for that and never let you forget it for the remainder of our days.
If you want to, yeah.
Yeah, good. And so you've mentioned it a couple of times whilst we've been talking, but you've been fairly open when it comes to talking about your mental health. Yes. Would you mind telling people a bit about your journey and how your perspective on mental health has changed over time?
Yes, of course. And just precursor on this one, I think I have always been very open about talking about my mental health. And I think that is the way that it should be.
Mm.
If you were to sprain your ankle or break your leg, you wouldn't think twice about telling somebody, oh, I've got this injury. But if there's an injury in your brain or there's something going on within you, why do we shy away from it? So yeah, I have always been very vocal about my mental health and the journey I've been on. So my journey with mental health has been, again, I wouldn't say it's any particularly worse or better than anybody else's because everyone's journey is individual to themselves. But what I will say is that for me personally, it's been a massive learning curve. And the way I look at things, I always like to try and find the beauty in it. And that wasn't always the case. But if I was to look back now and find the beauty in the journey that I've been on, I would say that it's really shaped me into who I am now. And I wouldn't be in this position now if it wasn't for the hardships that I've been through.
Mm.
It stems back, in my adult years, it stems back to the whole Canada trip and having to come back, having a failed relationship coming back. That's when I really saw it manifesting in myself. That's when I was, let's say, conscious enough to be able to turn to somebody and say, something's not right. But before that, I always thought, looking back now, even into my childhood, I just always thought that's the way things were. I never particularly got massive amounts of enjoyment out of things. When I was happy, I was all right. I was happy, but I was never kind of crying with laughter kind of thing. And I'd look at people and I don't know this now until, I'm nearly 40 and looking back on my life. I'd look at people around me mess around in class and think, why are they so happy? Why are they so laughing so much? And, I never got that buzz.
Mm.
So yeah, but I think also as well, linking that to my sport, I think that was my absolute escapism. Basketball was my escapism. They say that singers feel their freest when they're on stage. I always felt, complete freedom when I was on the basketball court, whether that was training or playing in a mat. It was just my complete escapism. So yeah, my mental health journey stems from my childhood. Without going too far into that, because we'd be here all day, it really manifested itself in my mid to late 20s when I came back from Canada from that failed relationship. And it took me on a journey of depression and anxiety, deep depression more than anxiety, but they often go hand in hand, as you hear a lot of the time. And to my worst, I was often, I couldn't hold the job down because I couldn't put that face on. I couldn't keep that face up of, the happy, perfect life and smiling through the day, and especially sitting in an office. I just couldn't do it, to the point where I would get in at 9 o'clock into the office and think, right, I've got 3 hours, keep your face on for 3 hours. Then I'd go and sit in the toilets for an hour and cry. And then I'd think to myself, right, you're back here now. You've only got a couple of hours till you get home, and you get home, and I'd just be completely whacked and drained for the day. Yeah. And then going from there to working in hospitality, I kind of, looking back, I did kind of run away from life at the time, because I felt like a massive failure off the back of the relationship from Canada. You know, I look at all the people around me, and they'd spent their time passing their driving tests, getting good jobs, working through the ranks. You know, a lot of them had houses, and a lot of them had, you know, potentially, you know, they had good relationships with partners and potentially babies on the way. And I had none of that. And I was just comparing myself continuously. So I thought, let me just run away to Newquay, where it's a bunch of people who are very much in the same boat as me. And then from there, I don't know if something clicked in me to the point where I thought, right, okay, well, the only way I'm going to get around this is if I change me and change the way I'm looking at things and change my way of living. And then with that, like I say, coming out of lockdown and being furloughed, that had a profound effect on me, because it allowed me to sit back and take stock and think, right, what can change? What needs to change? And then that put me on a bit of a journey of almost self-discovery. I read a book in lockdown, Good Vibes, Good Life by Vex King, which I think I ordered for you and sent it to you.
Yeah, I would highly recommend to anyone, actually.
I'd say that book was the one that changed everything for me. It just completely changed my perspective on everything. And then I started thinking to myself, what can change? Let's start looking at just the small things. And I didn't realize at the time that I was then building new habits and new forms and new barriers of how to protect my own mental health. And then looking back now, it's quite strange, because I do a lot of that with the clients I work with on a one-to-one basis. Because we said it quite recently, is a lot of people, they don't need physical change, they need mental change. You know, they need to look at the habits within themselves and what are they doing on a daily basis that is going to make the change, and subsequently the physical change will come. So my journey has been very colourful, very complex. I'm very grateful for it. And I would encourage anybody who is going through a journey like that at the minute to talk and reach out, but also understand that if you can get into a dark place like that, you can get out of a dark place like that. It just may take a little bit longer, and you've just got to keep digging day at a time. If you can't take it a day at a time, take it an hour at a time, sometimes even a minute at a time, and you will get there. But you have to find it in yourself to think, what can I change to change my environment?
And it's about being boundaried, I suppose, as well.
Yes,
having those boundaries
definitely
in place to make sure that you can prevent yourself going back to that place as much as possible. You know, it's always things that are outside of our control, but
yeah, definitely. I think as well, a lot of people think of me quite ruthless at the minute. Well, not at the minute. These days, I think a lot of people think of me as being quite ruthless in the decisions I make sometimes. But what a lot of people don't understand is the fact that those are my boundaries. If I don't want to do something, I won't do it. If it's going to impact my sleep, I won't do it, because I know that my sleep is a boundary that I've put in place that makes me function on my highest frequency. And there's I'm not going to sit here and tell everybody that they need to cut out everybody in their life that isn't serving them, but that was something that I did quite aggressively, and I still probably do, is if somebody isn't serving me in my life, obviously it's a two-way street, you know, that's how friendships and relationships work. But if a relationship isn't serving me, it's not something that I want to be around. So I think you've got to be quite ruthless, because at the end of the day, it's your journey, and it's your mental health. And if you've not got a solid mind and a solid personality and a solid principles, it's, you're only going to waver at some point.
And I think that's quite a good segue into the next question, which is, what do you think that people misunderstand about you the most?
I think people think I'm quite sharp, quite blunt, quite bullshit at times, potentially a little bit rude. But I would argue I'm completely the opposite of everything. You know, I was always brought up to say please, thank you, hello, goodbye, all those, and I always will to everybody. And I always will give somebody the time of day. Yeah, I'll always respect the people around me, but if I then don't feel like that is, you know, returned, I'll give a couple of chances to people, you know, but going back to my boundary where, you know, if something isn't serving me, I don't want to be around it. You know, if there's a negative feel around something, I don't want to be around it because that's only going to bring me down. That's only going to make, you know, if I'm around somebody who I would perceive as maybe, let's say, lazy, I don't want to be around them because that's going to make me feel lazy. You know, if I consider myself quite a hardworking person, if somebody around me isn't working as hard as what I perceive is how I work, I don't want to be around them because that's solely going to impact me and my performance and my lifestyle. In terms of being bullshit and upfront and a bit harsh, I like to be to the point. I think as a society these days, and this might be a controversial opinion, but as a society these days where we like to fluff a lot. And I don't know if it's a British thing. I mean, if you look at a lot of Europeans or Eastern Europeans, a lot of them, you would think they're quite rude. Well, they're not. They just say yes. They just say no. If they don't want to say
how it is.
Yeah. They don't say, oh my God, yes, no, I would love to, but I just really can't today. It's no, don't want to because they don't want to do it. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I think I definitely adopt that kind of mindset with things. But, you know, to think that I'm a rude person or, you know, bullshit person, I think that's the misunderstanding. I mean, I know you're biased because you're my wife and you're my family, but what would you say?
Do you really want me to answer that?
No, don't answer that.
Moving on. Slightly easier question for you now. So you've recently become self-employed as a personal trainer, as you mentioned previously. Currently training people face-to-face, although there is an online option as well, just anyone that's interested and might not live locally. So how's that all going for you, and what are your plans for the future?
So yes, became self-employed late last year. Loving it. Love the freedom. Hate the imposter syndrome. And I think that is, that's a massive part of being self-employed, especially in the first days. I think, or that's something I've learned to understand, is that imposter syndrome will get you at least once a week. But I always say that if you're feeling imposter syndrome, it's because you are doing something that puts you out of your comfort zone, which, you know, I've always been employed. I've always worked in a gym where I've had a monthly income, steady monthly income. But when you're out on your own, the imposter syndrome gets you. But somebody did tell me just before I started working self-employed, they were like, once you take that leap, you find a different gear that you didn't know you had. And I've definitely found that gear.
I guess it's kind of a bit of fear. Like,
yeah, definitely.
If you're in employment, you can maybe not coast, but you don't have to put your all in if you don't want to, because you know you're getting that monthly salary. Whereas when you're self-employed, you've got the fear of, okay, if I don't do the work, I'm not going to get paid.
Exactly. Yeah. And
then your wife will be on your back.
Yeah, exactly. You know, totally that. But also as well, I think there's, from my personal viewpoint, is I think there's a lot of coasting in the fitness industry and a lot of fluffing things up. So, you know, people like to talk themselves up, but you'll find that the people who like to talk themselves up are always the people who are coasting and not putting the work in. And going back to that, you know, that bit of advice that you find yourself as a gear that you didn't know you had. You know, once you find that gear, you're like, well, okay, well, if this is going to be a success, this is down to me. This is on me. And yeah, I think it's a challenge, but it's a challenge that I've been building up to since since way back to 2011-12, because it's something that I've always wanted to, it's always been on my radar. I wouldn't say it's always something I've wanted to do, but it's always been on my radar is to work for myself. But definitely within the last 5 or 6 years, it's something that I've wanted to really push for. And I'm secretly proud that I'm now at the stage where I can work for myself. I have the freedom and the wealth of time to, say that I work for myself. But that doesn't mean that I need to take my foot off the gas because, this industry can't get lazy because there's always somebody who's going to be nibbling at your heels. But no, I absolutely love it. I love the freedom of time that I have. I love the fact that I can choose my own hours. Like I said earlier, my day starts probably about 4:30 and I'm normally done by at least, bare minimum is 2:00. I'm normally home by 1:00. Within that, I've taught 2 classes, probably done 2-3 clients. And it's a great industry to be in. It's a great position for me to be in at the minute. It's very scary, but I don't take that for granted. And the faith that my current clients have in me with their own fitness journeys, their own mental well-being, their fitness goals, their nutrition goals, I don't take any of that for granted. And I'm massively thankful for that. What's for the future? I'm just going to keep grinding with it, keep plugging away, and building up the Coach by Matthews brand. We have the Coach by Matthews Academy coming out later this year. We're just doing the finishing touches now. Everything is done with it. I just need to polish it up. The Coach by Matthews Academy is a 6-week course that we've developed. Covers everything from goal setting to mindset to nutritional advice, explaining everything that you need to know to get the most out of your nutrition and performance. And then going into kind of how to write a program, how to lift particular weights, what kind of lifts are what, how to structure a program yourself. So essentially at the end of the 6-week course, you are able to do everything you need. You don't actually really need a PT, to be honest. But if you do, we're here. So that will be launching soon. That is on our app. So you work through it's a 6-week course with 6 modules. You work through the modules. I think there's 50 plus videos on there. You work through that. And then there's a group aspect to it as well. So we'll be periodically taking in groups of people, cohorts of people, and they will be working in a group environment on group calls. But it's a self-guided module, self-guided course, and you get lifetime access to it. So that's really good. So it's massive value for money there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And, we've worked hard to put something together that we think that will be really helpful for you all and is also good value for money as well.
Yeah, very, very good value for money. We're hoping to launch in a couple of weeks. So look out on the socials for that, for sure.
Definitely. Thank you so much for answering these questions today and allowing the listeners the opportunity to get to know you a bit better. Can you just tell everyone where they can find you?
Yes, my main platform that I use would be Instagram. So that would be MikeMatthews.PT. But that's the same username for all platforms as well. So Facebook, TikTok. Yeah, so reach out to me if you've got any questions. MikeMatthews.PT.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode today. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And we will see you on the next episode of Let's Talk.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Goodbye.